Since leaving banking and going full-time as a broker, we've settled over $60 million in lending across 78 clients in the last 8 months, with another 30 clients in the pipeline. And we've done it with a 100% lender approval rate. Every single application that we've submitted has been approved. The reason that number is so high is because we don't submit a deal until we've pulled apart the client's entire lending position and rebuilt it so the numbers work even before we go near a lender. Most investors I work with come to me after their bank or their existing broker has told them that they've hit their ceiling. They've been told that there's no more borrowing capacity. And within the first 5 minutes of looking at their situation, I can usually see exactly where the problem is and how to fix it. And that is as a direct result of the process I've spent years developing. In this video, I'm going to show you the exact process and how we use it to help you achieve your goals. Every single week during my 11 years inside the banking system, I'd come across some clients who had a perfect credit profile, good income, solid assets, and I couldn't help them. I could only offer what my bank had on the shelf, and if the product didn't fit, that conversation was over. I had one client who owned multiple petrol stations and wanted to buy investment properties to grow his portfolio. This man worked incredibly hard. He lived in a modest accommodation near his business because that's where he needed to be. The credit manager couldn't get past the fact that the accommodation didn't match his income and profile. He was painting this client with the same brush as everyone else when it needed to be looked in a completely different light. After years of that, I knew I needed to be on the other side of the desk. So when my daughter was born, I looked at my career and where it was heading and made the decision to step out. My wife started our broking business a couple of years earlier, and I could see that she needed my support through that new chapter, so I left. And from the very first client that I took on as a broker, I built the process around their situation first. And this process isn't something I use just for clients. I've applied the same thinking for my own portfolio over the years. When most people think about getting a loan, they think of it as a transaction. You go to the bank or your broker and you tell them what income you earn and what you want to buy. They come back to you with a rate and a number. If the answer is no, you assume that's it. The bank said no, so you're done. That's like going to a builder and asking them to construct a house. They look at the land and say, can't be done, without ever getting a surveyor out or testing what's actually underneath the surface. This surface level assessment is what most people get. It only captures a fraction of what's possible. Your borrowing capacity changes depending on which lender assesses you, what buffer rate they apply, how they treat your income, how your debt's structured across entities and lenders, and where your equity sits. So when I look at a client situation, I'm looking at the entire structure of their lending position and asking, what's actually blocking this and how do we redesign this so the numbers work? That's what I called the structural lending method. Think of it like an architect designing a building. You never start by picking the materials and hoping they suit the site. You start with what the finished building needs to look like. Then you work backwards from there, understanding the site, the constraints, and design something that achieves the vision within them. Lending should work the same way. So I've developed a structural lending method that has 5 stages. The first stage is the full position review, and it's where I spend my most time. When a client comes to me, I need to understand their full financial architecture, including which lenders they're with, what products they're on, what rates they're paying, whether they're on principal and interest or interest only, what's their total equity position and how much they have in liabilities, how their income is structured, and what entities they're using for borrowing, whether it's a trust or SMSF. Every one of these details changes the calculation. For example, a $10,000 credit card that you're not even using could cost you between $25,000 to $30,000 in borrowing capacity because the bank allocates a $380 per month against the limit, whether you use it or not. Or if you've got an investment property loan on principal and interest repayment, that's great for paying the loan down over time. but it can actually work against you if you're trying to buy more property. Your monthly repayments are higher, and that squeezes your cash flow. And some lenders will use actual repayments in their assessment rather than calculating based on interest rate and remaining term. So the same debt can look very different to two different lenders depending on how it's being repaid. I also need to understand where the client's actually headed. Someone who wants to buy 2 more investment properties over the next 5 years needs a completely different structure to someone who's trying to free up cash flow right now. So we always start with the end in mind. Then once I've got the full picture, I move to step number 2, the bottleneck diagnosis. Most of the time, when someone's been told that they can't borrow anymore, it's because something specific in their structure is blocking their capacity. For example, it might be the buffer rate. If a lender applies a 3% buffer rate and the rates are 6%, they're being tested at 9%. But there are lenders that actually apply a 1 or a 2% buffer rate, which yields a completely different outcome. It also might be how their income is being assessed. Self-employed clients get hit by this consistently. One bank might need 24 months of trading history and only use the bottom line figures in your tax returns. Another will accept 6 months and add back depreciation and non-recurring expenses. Another bottleneck might be the way the debt is spread across multiple lenders, so that each one only sees their slice and nobody's looking at the full picture. Or it could be something as simple as a $23,000 car loan, but a monthly repayment of $800 that's eating into serviceability just enough to tip the balance. For example, I had a client who paid a 5% deposit on a $1.1 million property in Sydney. He worked as a car salesman on a commission-only income. He wanted to buy an investment property while living with his parents. He had a 10% deposit plus stamp duty in total, which came in from a profit on a property he'd recently sold. And he'd taken a big gap in the year before to travel, so he'd earned almost nothing during that period. So we're dealing with 4 challenges at once: commission-only income, a low deposit, a weak previous financial year, and a 5% deposit already paid, which meant the clock was ticking. So with this example, you can see multiple bottlenecks that can stack up on the same deal. And if you only solve one of them, the loan still doesn't get across the line. You can't fix what you haven't diagnosed. And diagnosing it properly means understanding the policies and quirks of dozens of different lenders, because that's where the solution lives. The next stage of the structural lending method is the strategic restructure. Once I know what's blocking the capacity, I can design a structure that removes it. For some clients, that means consolidating a portfolio from 3 or 4 different lenders into one lender who offers a better assessment term. For others, it means restructuring how debt is allocated across properties so that one property carries low risk and high equity, making it easy to refinance out and extract capital. Sometimes it means moving investment loans to interest-only repayments to free up serviceability, or using a non-bank lender, as I like to call it, a parking station, where you can pay a slightly higher rate for up to 12 to 18 months while the property appreciates, and then refinance back to a major bank at better terms if the circumstances improve. Every client's restructure looks different, but the principle is always the same. Redesign the lending architecture so the numbers work, rather than accepting what the first lender tells you. There's almost always a way. You just have to balance achieving your desired outcome versus managing the cash flow. This is the stage where my time inside the banking system makes the biggest difference. I know what exceptions exist within the policies that aren't published anywhere. I know what credit managers want to see when they're assessing a deal that sits outside their standard policy, and how to present the case in a way that it addresses their concerns before they even raise them. Every deal that comes through our business gets analyzed to the point where the client can call me while I'm driving and I can rattle off their numbers without being in front of my computer. We do not submit a deal to a lender unless we know it will be approved. If that means workshopping it with multiple lenders, seeking credit exceptions, and going back and forth until the structure is right, that's what we do. We collect all the documents, conduct a full assessment of current and future positions, verify everything from income variance to living expense, and then walk the client through options verbally before we send them the credit proposal. If they're happy, we sign and lodge the application. Stage number 4, which is called execution. The reason we're so careful at this stage is that a declined application isn't just a setback. It's a hard credit inquiry on your file, and too many of these will drop your credit score, which makes the next application harder. Getting it right the first time protects your position going forward. Now, you might think that that's where the process ends, but there's actually a 5th stage. We call that the long game. After settlement, we do reviews at 1 week, 2 months, 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months. The reason is that lending markets move consistently. A new lender might come to the market with better terms. A policy change might open up a door that was previously closed. Your income might increase. Your family situation might change. Or the structure we put in place might need adjusting. For example, if we use a non-bank lender as a parking station, we're actively checking whether it's time to bring you back to a major bank. If your fixed rate is expiring, we might already be looking at options before you get caught on a higher variable rate. A client whose portfolio is optimized and growing is a client who keeps coming back for the next property. That's how we've built this business. And it's why we treat every client relationship as a long-term partnership. I recently had a couple come to me. Let's call them Paul and Layla. They built a portfolio of 8 residential investment properties and owned their home outright. They were solid investors who'd been disciplined about buying properties whenever they had the savings or income to support it. Layla had gone on maternity leave and come back to part-time work, so her income roughly halved. All of their investment loans had rolled onto principal and interest repayments. Cash flow was getting tight, and they were starting to eat into their savings. They came to me because they wanted to restructure their portfolio now so they could start investing again in 12 months. They had a clear vision of where they wanted to be. They just couldn't see how they could get there from where they were. Their existing debts were spread across multiple lenders. And with Layla on part-time hours, 2 dependents, high principal and interest repayments, their current lenders were telling them there was no more room to buy another one. So I mapped out every property, every loan balance, every lender, and every rate. I looked at rental income across all 8 investment properties and noted that all the debt was investment debt, with their home sitting without a mortgage. That's actually quite an important detail because investment debt is tax deductible, which helps in the borrowing calculation. The bottleneck was clear. They were being assessed at a 3% buffer rate across multiple different lenders. With Layla's reduced income, the numbers couldn't work at all. On top of that, most properties were strata titled units, which meant higher ongoing costs eating into their cash flow and serviceability. So we needed a lender with a policy exception that would allow us to assess the entire portfolio at a 1% buffer instead of a 3% buffer. And we found one. So we took their entire lending portfolio from multiple different lenders and consolidated it to one single lender. We put all their investment debts on interest-only repayments to maximize cash flow. We also found something interesting when we looked more closely at their home loan. Over the years, they'd pull equity out of their home to fund their investment purchases, but the debt stayed sitting on a home loan instead of being reclassified as an investment debt. This is actually quite a common mistake. We were able to show the lender exactly how and when that money was used to buy investment properties, which meant we could reclassify those loans as investment debt. That opened the door to better negative gearing treatment, which improved tax efficiency on their whole position. But besides that, their cash flow stabilized. The portfolio was on a trajectory to support new investments within 12 months, and they had a clear roadmap on the next purchase. I had another client. Let's call him Chris. Chris is a buyer's agent with 5 properties. 2 of them were under his personal name, and 3 of them were under a trust and a company structure. His partner, Penny, had 7 investment properties, all under her personal name. They also had 4 properties in their SMSF. Chris wanted to buy another property through their super. His existing broker ran the numbers and came back to him with a maximum loan amount of $600,000 at an 80% LVR for a property worth $750,000. That would have required him to use 20% of their super funds for the deposit plus stamp duty and legal costs. Chris wanted a second opinion from someone who specializes in SMSF and investor lending. So he came to me. I looked at everything. Their total loan value across all entities was $3.6 million and combined rental income over $380,000. Their combined personal income was also substantial and they had no mortgage on their home. What the previous broker had missed was that Penny was already contributing $30,000 a year to super from her employer, which put her at the concessional contribution cap. But she hadn't explored non-concessional contributions. Her serviceability showed that she could comfortably contribute an additional $120,000 per year as voluntary after-tax contribution. By adding that $120,000 into the SMSF income calculation, the servicing position changed completely. I also found them a lender who could go up to 90% LVR on an SMSF loan without mortgage insurance. We sat down with Chris, Penny, and their financial advisor to walk through the approach. The advisor agreed with the strategy, and instead of a $600,000 pre-approval at 80% LVR, we were able to get them a $1.25 million pre-approval at a 90% LVR for a property worth $1.38 million. Although the structural lending method has given us a 100% approval rate so far, it's not magic. There are situations where the numbers won't work, regardless of how the structure is designed. Income stability matters. If your earnings are swinging 30 to 40% month to month, lenders are going to find it hard to approve your application, regardless of how the structure is designed. That needs to stabilize first. Same goes for your credit history. If you've got defaults or a pattern of late repayments, that needs to be cleaned up before any structural work can be done. The foundation has to be solid. On the SMSF side, if your super balance is under $150,000, the numbers are going to be tight. You'll likely end up buying a low value asset in a regional area that may not be the best use of your retirement funds. Now, I'm a broker, so obviously the full structural lending method is something we implement for clients. But if you're watching this and thinking about your own situation, there's something you can do right now before you talk to any broker or lender. Sit down and map your full lending position in one place. Look at your income, your loans, interest rates, repayments, credit cards, and car loans. Basically, create a spreadsheet with all your income and all your expenses. You'd be surprised how much clarity that exercise gives you on its own, because you'll have a better idea of whether you can afford the repayments on the property from a cash flow perspective. And if the answer is yes, that's a solid starting point. And if you've already been told you can't borrow anymore, go back and specifically ask why. Get the actual reason. Is it the buffer rate? Is it how your income is being treated? Is it a liability that you could clear? Or is it because a particular bank policy that was written 28 years ago and hasn't been updated since? Because the answer to those questions determine what the solution looks like. And different lenders will give you different answers to the same question. If you want to explore what your lending structure actually looks like and whether there's capacity you're not seeing, I've left a link below to book a strategy call. We'll look at your numbers, your goals, and map out whether the structural lending method can open up a pathway that you didn't know was there. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.